Hello, dear storytellers and history lovers. Welcome back to the channel where the past comes alive, one story at a time. Today, we're stepping into a pivotal moment that helped ignite a revolution, reshape a nation, and echo through the halls of democracy for centuries to come. It's the year 1765, and across the American colonies, a quiet tension is about to erupt into something far louder. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's journey together through the streets of Boston, the taverns of New York, and the courthouses of Virginia as we explore the story behind the Stamp Act, a law that changed everything. In the spring of 1765, King George III sat on the British throne. His empire stretched across oceans and continents. Britain had just emerged victorious from the 7 Years' War known in America as the French and Indian War, but victory came at a staggering cost. The national debt had nearly doubled, and British officials were desperate to find new sources of revenue. Their eyes turned westward, across the Atlantic, to the 13 American colonies. For decades, the colonies had enjoyed what historians call salutary neglect, a hands-off approach from London that allowed them to govern themselves with minimal interference. They paid some duties on trade, yes, but they were largely left alone to manage their own affairs. Now, however, Parliament believed it was time for the colonists to help pay for their own defense. After all, British soldiers still remained stationed along the frontier to protect colonial settlements from potential threats. Enter George Grenville, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. A meticulous man with a reputation for fiscal discipline, Grenville proposed a bold and controversial solution: a direct tax on the colonies, not a tariff on imported goods, which many colonists accepted as part of imperial trade, but an internal tax that would reach into everyday life. This was the Stamp Act, passed by Parliament on March 22, 1765. The Stamp Act required that many printed materials in the colonies be produced on stamped paper produced in London, carrying an embossed revenue stamp. Legal documents, newspapers, pamphlets, licenses, even playing cards and dice all would now carry a tax. The money collected would go directly to funding British troops stationed in North America. At first glance, it seemed like a modest measure, but to the colonists, it struck at the heart of something much deeper: their rights as Englishmen. The rallying cry soon became clear. No taxation without representation. Since the colonies had no elected representatives in Parliament, they argued it was unconstitutional for that body to impose direct taxes on them. Colonial assemblies, from Massachusetts to South Carolina, began issuing resolutions condemning the act. In Virginia, a young firebrand named Patrick Henry stood before the House of Burgesses and delivered a blistering speech that included the famous line, "If this be treason, make the most of it." His resolutions, though moderated by older delegates, sent shockwaves through the colonies. But resistance wasn't limited to speeches and petitions. In Boston, the birthplace of so much revolutionary fervor, anger boiled over quickly. On August 14th, an effigy of Andrew Oliver, the newly appointed stamp distributor from Massachusetts, was found hanging from the Liberty Tree, a large elm on Boston Common. A crowd gathered, grew, and marched to Oliver's office, ransacking it before parading to his home and beheading the effigy. Fearing for his life, Oliver resigned the next day. This wasn't an isolated incident. Across the colonies, stamp distributors were harassed, threatened, and forced to resign. In New York, protesters stormed the home of Lieutenant Governor Cadwallader Colden after he refused to surrender the stamps. In Rhode Island, mobs burned effigies and destroyed property. The Sons of Liberty, a loose network of artisans, merchants, and tradesmen, emerged as the driving force behind this organized resistance, using both persuasion and intimidation to nullify the law before it could even take effect. Newspapers played a crucial role, too. Printers like William Bradford in Philadelphia and James Parker in New York used their presses not only to report the news, but to shape public opinion. Pamphlets flooded the colonies, arguing legal and philosophical cases against the Stamp Act. One of the most influential voices belonged to a Boston lawyer named John Adams, who wrote passionately about natural rights and the dangers of unchecked parliamentary power. By October 1765, representatives from 9 colonies gathered in New York City for the Stamp Act Congress, the first significant joint colonial response to British measures. Delegates drafted a Declaration of Rights and Grievances, asserting that only their own elected assemblies had the right to tax them. Though respectful in tone, the message was unmistakable. The colonies would not submit quietly. Meanwhile, back in London, British merchants began to feel the economic sting. Colonial boycotts of British goods, organized by groups like the Daughters of Liberty, who encouraged homespun clothing and domestic production, were hitting profits hard. Trade with America plummeted. Petitions poured into Parliament from worried businessmen pleading for repeal. Even some British politicians began to question the wisdom of the Stamp Act. William Pitt, the Elder, a towering figure in British politics, declared in Parliament, "I rejoice that America has resisted." He argued that while Parliament had the right to regulate trade, it had no right to levy internal taxes on people who had no voice in that body. Finally, under mounting pressure, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act on March 18, 1766. Church bells rang in Philadelphia. Bonfires lit up the night in Charleston. In New York, colonists erected a statue of King George III in gratitude, though that same statue would later be melted down for bullets during the Revolution. But celebration was short-lived. On the very same day, the Stamp Act was repealed. Parliament passed the Declaratory Act, which asserted its full authority to make laws binding the colonies in all cases whatsoever. The message was clear. Britain might have backed down this time, but it had no intention of surrendering its sovereignty. The Stamp Act crisis may have lasted less than a year, but its legacy endured. It united disparate colonies around a common cause for the first time. It gave rise to new forms of political organization and protest, and it planted the seeds of a revolutionary idea that ordinary people could challenge imperial power and demand a say in their own governance. 10 years later, those seeds would blossom into full-blown revolution. The men and women who shouted in Boston streets, debated in Virginia courthouses, and boycotted British tea weren't just reacting to attacks. They were defending a principle. And that principle, that government derives its power from the consent of the governed, would become the bedrock of a new nation. And there you have it, the story of the Stamp Act of 1765, a moment when ink on paper sparked a fire that would one day light the torch of American independence. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss another tale from the past. Until next time, keep wondering, keep questioning, and remember, history isn't just about dates and laws. It's about people, passion, and the courage to stand up for what's right. See you soon.